The Raiders' offensive line gave up 64 sacks last season, and Ashton Jeanty got hit in the backfield at one of the highest clips in the league. So, will they be able to turn it around up front with Klint Kubiak and company bringing that wide zone scheme to town? Well, that's what we're going to find out today. Raider Nation, what's good? Jesse Merrick here. Welcome into another episode of the Silver and Black Sports Network podcast presented by PrizePicks. Now, today, we're taking a deep dive into the Raiders' offensive line. And to help me do that, we're calling on our buddy Marshall Newhouse, the former Raiders tackle who spent over a decade in the league and now co-hosts the Just Win podcast with Ted Wynn. And today, Marshall and I are going to tackle three big things along that offensive line. We're going to dive into what the Kubiak scheme demands of an O-line, how the pieces they've currently got in the fold fit into that scheme, and how exactly the young guys, like Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant, project into the competition for a starting spot along that group, okay? All that and more coming your way on today's show. But before we get there, you know how we do it. We got to get to our question of the day. And today, I want to know how big of a jump you guys are expecting out of the Raiders' offensive line with Klint Kubiak and Rick Dennison coming to town to fix that group. Let me know in the comments how much improvement you think you're going to see from that group. And if you're new here, smash those like and subscribe buttons, and make sure you check us out online too at silverandblacksportsnetwork.com to subscribe to our free Raiders newsletter. It's a one-stop shop for all the latest Raiders news, insights, and analysis delivered right to your inbox every Friday morning for free. So go check it out. Now, with all that out of the way, let's dive into today's offensive line breakdown with Marshall Newhouse. All right, Marshall, thanks for joining us, man. We're going to talk some offensive line. Obviously, last year was a rough one for them. They allowed 64 sacks, and Ashton Jeanty only had 112 rushing yards before contact. And now Kubiak and Dennison are coming to town to try and fix this thing. So as you take last season and this new staff coming in, how are you feeling about the offensive line and how it's currently made up here in early April?
Well, listen, I have a lot more hope than the fans do. Obviously, the way things were organized last year was not sustainable. It's not good enough. It was well below par. But with the things coming out with the coaching change, we now realize there was a lot of both underperformance by the players, but just a lack of coaching direction and a lack of continuity. And I think that will be one of the things that will raise the floor as I talk about this offensive line group. Klint Kubiak and John Spytek have both said outwardly, which is you have to pay attention to the words that they're saying in this process. They believe there's some talent in this room and that it didn't achieve its total potential last year. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to draft. That doesn't mean they're not going to try to improve. But when it comes to guys like DJ Glaze and Grant and Rogers, they feel like there's more there than like that can be squeezed out. And so if you add that to this outside zone scheme, which is outside zone heavy, and a heavy run scheme, I mean, Klint Kubiak in Seattle ran the ball 50% of the time. He is a guy that is committed to running, even when it's a 2-yard gain, even when it's a 3-yard gain. He is trying to keep balance and set up the play action game because that is where the big shots are made. But it takes a little pressure off the offensive line. If they can come around and start performing and making this an efficient run game, just a little bit efficient, because even the Seahawks weren't that efficient. They just ran it just for the sake of running it, being in 12, 13, 21 personnel so they could throw play action and really keep teams off balance with their personnel packages. So I think with the guys in the room, they're going to get this whole offseason to really figure out what Klint Kubiak wants to do. They have the outside zone scheme for them and in general, it solves a lot of problems from very similar looking plays and similar looking setups. And so you get guys who are athletic and understand. That's why the Tyler Linderbaum signing was so huge. Klint Kubiak has come out and said, we're going to ask him to call the fronts. He's going to be doing so much mental work on top of his physical ability that it hopefully will get everybody else in line. We know who the mic is. We know who the points after that are. And then we're going to run off the ball and move people and make them adapt to us. And so I think that scheme will start to take guys who didn't have a lot of confidence, who are young, and again, in Rodgers and Grant, and get them opportunities to see what this could look like in a successful oriented offense.
Yeah, look, you hit on a lot of really great points there, but the coaching staff as a whole last year, that really bled into every position group on this team, but it was so obvious within that O-line room as well. And if we're being honest with a guy like DJ Glaze, he was kind of on the rise before last year, so I think we have to take that into account as we evaluate him, and we'll dive into him a bit later on in the show with you. But before we really dive into this conversation, let's start off by defining some things for the fans at home. For starters, let's get into the blocking schemes. We've got gap schemes and zone schemes. What are the main differences between both of those?
Yeah, well, the gap schemes are, they're down blocking schemes. You're trying to split the defense. You can use that. You can use pin and pull. You can use power, duo. You heard these terms, but there's a gap inside, and you're trying to create leverage. And you usually genuinely want a certain type of body type for that, and you're asking the running back to have a different mindset and aiming point for that. And so. Listen, it's a choice. There's teams that kind of a little bit more multiple. I've played on teams that really try to do that heavily. But Klint Kubiak, I think, believes in stretching teams inside, outside zone because it marries so well. He's quoted as saying one run call can be used 7 different ways. And that's just in the run game and play action. And so the outside zone, in retrospect, it's you're really zoning off to a certain number of guys. You're counting on one side of the football, and you're counting for players, but also it allows for when teams are starting to do more complicated run fits where they're buzzing a safety down, or they're adding linebackers late, or shifting with the motion. The zone can account for that on the fly, but it takes understanding of what the scheme is asking for. And so I think the zone scheme covers a lot of I think the offensive line will be up to date faster because it allows you to be more of an athlete. And so a lot of these guys, once they figure it out, it's quicker for them to click, to be like, oh, okay, I know where I'm going. And it might not look perfect at the snap, but if we're all on the same page, you're more than likely, especially with a back as talented as Ashton Jeanty, you're going to get a lot more positive runs. And so gap scheme is more downhill. You're splitting the defense, you're down blocking, you're double teaming down. And outside zone is really, you're running laterally, you're running more at an angle. And that's not all they do. That's not all Klint Kubiak wants to do, but that is what he wants to lean on, and he is not shy about it.
Yeah, and Rick Dennison, you mentioned him. He's been doing it for a long time now. I'm curious, have you talked to any of the guys around the league in the O-line circles who've actually played for him? And if so, have they told you about what it's like to play for him and kind of what he's like as a coach?
Yeah, I've talked to a few people. I never had a chance to play for him, unfortunately, but I've heard a lot of good things. And he's very matter of fact. I think he's going to be a refreshing voice in the offensive line room for what these guys have experienced the last year. But I think there's going to be some very honest conversations and honest coaching and feedback, which is what they need. That's what you need to grow. And anyone that really wants to be great and wants to be hone their craft will be open and receptive to that. And ultimately just clarity. We saw with Brendan Carroll, it just felt like there was not clarity in assignment and fit and what these guys were being expected to do on Sundays. And to me, that's half the battle. If I just know what I'm doing, like, give me a chance and I'll go make a play. But they're so disjointed on the inside with their double teams and with the actual assignment points. And it just felt like week in and week out, there was a lot of unforced errors that really just didn't even let the offense get started because of the offensive line. And I've always said that the offense goes as we go. And so that group of 5 is going to be, they're going to have a lot on their shoulders. But I think there's more there than what we've witnessed in the recent memory.
Hey there, guys. We'll get back to the interview in a second, but real quick, we told you about our sponsor for today's show, PrizePicks. They're America's #1 sports picks app, and they're running a promo for new users right now. So go download the app and use the code HMA to play $5 and get $50 in lineups. For more info, check out the link in the description of today's video, and make sure you only play if you can do it responsibly and if you have the means to do so. In the meantime, though, let's dive back into our interview. Yeah, hey, look, that's definitely what the staff is banking on. Okay, now let's run it position by position now along the offensive line and explain their jobs in this scheme. Okay, we've heard Spytek and Kubiak both talk about how important center is to them compared to other teams around the league. So with that in mind, why is a guy like Tyler Linderbaum so critical for them in this Kubiak/Shanahan scheme that they're going to be running?
Well, listen, he's got the experience and athleticism for what Klint Kubiak wants. Because not only is he going to ask him to call out the fronts, call out the mic, and then make adjustments, he's going to have to reach sometimes a nose, a shade, if we're running outside zone. That they put a lot of weight on the center to reach harder techniques. And so if you have to have that ability, and people had some, I think, valid criticisms that maybe sometimes this pass protection wasn't perfect, and that's fine. But as a center, you're normally going to have guards on either side of you. I'm not as concerned about that. I think he is really stellar in the outside zone scheme. And then again, just getting the run game set before the snap is going to be such a big deal, and not having Jackson Powers-Johnson having to think too much. Whoever ends up settling at guard, not having to think too much, and guys can go play. And so they're going to put a lot on the shoulders, but that's what the $27 million a year is for.
Hey, look, let's keep it real. You get what you pay for, right? And they paid a whole lot of money to make sure that they got their guy with hopes of him coming in and completely changing things for them along that offensive line, really from the inside out. But you talked about JPJ there, so let's move along to the guards now. What exactly are they asked to do in this scheme?
Well, I think it's movement. I mean, if you look to Seattle last year, they Gray Zabel, a left guard, Anthony Bradford, big guys, athletic guys, but they need you to move the point. So if you're on the front side as a guard, you have a 3 technique, he's got to be displaced. And sometimes if they want to sit in there and play backdoor, that's fine. That's displacement in its own. And then the center takes over. But he's got to get moved so that the running back has a clear read. The running back at the snap, on typical outside zone, this is not all the running, but this will be where they're leaning. He's aiming at they call it the butt of the ghost tight end. So wherever the tight end should be or is, you're aiming at right at his tailbone. And so after a few steps, he's reading. He's either going to see the flow and cut back. He's going to stick his foot in the ground and get vertical, or he's going to bounce and really find his way on the outside. But that 3 technique is right there in the middle of that read. And they've got to either displace him back and out, on kind of this diagonal. And you need guards who can sometimes do that on their own. Now, Anthony Bradford is a big, mauling behemoth guy, but he whiffed a lot. They dealt with him having a lot of just like zeros, we call it, in the O-line run game, like grading scheme. He just kind of, was boom or bust. And so you don't need a guy who like completely knocks him to the sideline, but you do need displacement. And so I think, Jackson Powers-Johnson, I think, absolutely has a chance to do that game in and game out. He's a really powerful guy. And once they get his technique down of sustaining the strain of blocks after the initial pop, he's going to be a guy. You're going to see a lot of pancakes. You can see he loves it. He loves throwing people around. And so to me, that's going to be a big, big deal. And if you get that displacement, just imagine what Ashton Jeanty can do when that 3 tech is displaced and either the guard, the center, or the tackle climbs to the second level, and you've got bodies on bodies. Ashton Jeanty got hit more than almost any back in the league behind the line of scrimmage. And so just getting his toes to the original line of scrimmage without being touched is going to be a huge boon for this run game.
Yeah, look, we saw what issues he gave guys on the second or third level when he had room to really get going and get some momentum going. So that's going to be key. Next year, obviously, and that's also key for any guy. You can't do anything if you don't have the room to operate, obviously. But we heard Adam Butler, I think it was last year, say that he thinks at some point that Jackson Powers-Johnson could be an all-pro guard. I'm curious why you think that is. You mentioned the aggressiveness and stuff like that, but why do you think that Adam Butler, who's been in the league for a long time, would say something like that about Jackson?
Yeah, the best guards I ever played with. I played with Josh Sittons of the world and TJ Langs of the world when I was in Green Bay, and then Kelechi Osimile's, Gabe Jackson's in the former Oakland Raiders. And those guys, you could trust that they were powerful enough to take on the best D tackles sometimes in the game by themselves. But they were, to me, it was the attitude. It was the finish part. Because, your technique has to be there. Your assignment has to be there. But most guys will get that at that level of starting guard. But the way that you finish and really punish teams for 60 minutes. And we saw in some of the limited snaps of Jackson Powers-Johnson just how locked in he was to finishing guys. And that makes a big deal from an attitude standpoint. When he's finishing last, he's pissing off the defensive tackle. He's getting other guys, running. Like I think, can flourish when they just like kind of line him up and say, run and go get that guy, go maul him. And so he's got the athletic ability. He's really built well. He's built sturdily. He's got to stay healthy and then just get reps finally in one position. I don't know if it was left guard or right guard. In the old school, even when I played, you put the better pass protecting guard on the left But as the years have gone by, there's not as much emphasis on like, oh, we need blindside protection and all this and all that. Yes, that's still the case, but the pass rushers and pass rushing threats have evened out over time. So I'm not sure where they're going to put him. But either way, he'll be next to Tyler Linderbaum. So a lot of the assignment stuff, I think he'll speed up on. And then eventually it'll be his athleticism, his size, and just his finish and attitude. He's really going to set the tone for this offensive line group. And I agree with Adam Butler. He's got a Pro Bowler written on him. He's got to do it consistently over a season, stay healthy. But he has that ability for sure.
Yeah, look, I talk about the ripple effect of Tyler Linderbaum all the time, and a guy like Jackson will be really getting so much from him being brought into the fold. And now being able to fully concentrate on being a guard and letting his aggressiveness that we saw when he was healthy take over, it's honestly going to be fun to watch. And it's hard to say that about offensive linemen a lot of the times. But now, look, we see whether he's on the right or the left side. Obviously, that's going to transpire however it does. But opposite wherever he does end up, it's going to be a real interesting battle to see who takes hold of that other job, because there's a lot of bodies in the mix. They go and sign Spencer Burford. They also brought Jordan Meredith back, and he'll likely switch back to guard and can be your backup center too in a worst-case scenario type of deal. And then there's also Caleb Rogers. So as we look at everything here again in early April, take this what you will, I guess, is a better way to put it. But how do you think things shake out there opposite of Jackson?
Yeah, it's interesting. I still think that they drafted an interior lineman. Meredith, he had struggles, but again, I think a lot of that was to, just a lack of kind of direction. But, I see him more as like, the swing guard, swing center. I don't see him as a starting guard. In the best case scenario, Kubiak has talked about getting the best 5 guys on the field. I agree with that. And so, listen, they're going to open it to competition, I hope, that other guard position. And you're going to see guys kind of rotating in and out. And you're going to see who they can kind of depend on, who brings the presence and is just reliable. Because this offense, you don't have to – listen, Gray Zabel, I think, is I don't know if he made the Pro Bowl. He got Pro Bowl votes. He's on his way. He's a really good guard. I like him a lot. You don't need that right away, but you do need someone who – I know what I'm getting out of that position, because you're going to have Colton Miller left to you, and you're going to have Tyler Linderbaum in between, sandwich that we're assuming JPJ is at right guard, whatever. Yeah. But you're going to have a solid base there where you don't have to go be incredible, but you do need consistently. And I think the experience of a Burford and the youth and the athleticism of Charles Grant and Caleb Rogers potentially, kind of rotating in and out of there, they're going to have a guy with a lot of potential. It's just going to be who fits there the best and who wins the competition. The thing about a team that was as poor as the Raiders were last year is that nobody's job is safe. And, there's guys that we know we're penciling in, but I imagine that the training camp battles will be huge and really, really hotly contested, rightfully so. And the team will be better because of it. And then even the guy that doesn't win the job, I think you're going to have, you start thinking about who are the 7, maybe 8, maybe 9 guys we dress on game day, and you start realizing who can we rely on to be both versatile and dependable. And so I think the open competition helps that. These young guys really have a lot to show, but they're going to get their opportunities, I think, because Parham last year signed a free agency elsewhere. There's just no one on the roster you could be like has earned this role. And so to me, that's opportunity. And I think guys are going to jump at that. I think this energy of this new regime is going to really embrace that. And I think everyone will be better for it.
Yeah, and let's talk about Caleb Rogers here, too, because we heard John Spytek give him a shout-out saying that he's been at the facility nearly every day working out with all of the guys. I think a lot of fans are actually saying that he needs to be the guy at guard opposite of JPJ, but I want to know from you, did you see enough from him in his nearly, 300 or so snaps last year to feel confident in him winning that job? And also, how does he even fit into the scheme as well?
Yeah, listen, he played, 200, I think 84 snaps. He hasn't earned anything. But we saw, hey, this is, a guy, I think, who's licking his chops for an opportunity, has plenty of athleticism and ability, and just needs the reps and needs the fit. I think he'll fit very well in this zone scheme. It's also the buy-in has to be I'm running off the football. I'm trying to get off. I'm trying to get to my aiming point and move people. And if you can get a young guy bought into that, I think a guy like Caleb Rogers can really thrive in that. But yeah, by no means just from his limited snaps is he penciled in. But listen, they immediately, as soon as Kubiak signed and put his staff together, they're internally scouting first. Before there's ever free agency scouting, before there's ever draft scouting, they're internally scouting. They went through, I guarantee you, at least 4 to 5 games of every single player to see what do we have in-house. And they recognize that, hey, they probably heard some of the rumors about Pete Carroll refusing or being reluctant to play some of the young guys until very, very late in the season. And so they take that into account. But they saw the Denver games. They saw some of those games toward the end of the season. They're like, oh, like it's hard to not see see these guys play and your eyebrows stand up and be like, wait a minute. I knew they're rookies, but they're better than we thought, and they're more ready than we thought. And so you're going to get a chance to really develop them and see kind of what kind of worker they are. And obviously showing up in the offseason and being seen is a really good deal. And, gives you a lot of, not brownie points, but it lets the coach know you're serious. And if you're a young guy, with a new regime, I assume that nothing is like guaranteed. And so I'm going in, I got to earn a spot on the roster first, let alone a starting position. So I think he'll be given an ample opportunity to earn this spot. We'll see how the reps go through OTAs and minicamp and leading into training camp, but he'll be a guy they're definitely paying attention to.
Yeah, look, for a young guy, he's really doing all the right things, checking off all of those off-season boxes. So we'll wait and see how all that translates onto the field for him in year 2. But before we transition over to tackle here, you noted guard in the draft. So you do think that they actually go and add another guy there in the draft? And if so, do you think it comes higher or lower?
I think once the Max Crosby deal fell through, not that they were going to take a guard at 16 or 14, whatever that pick from Baltimore was, but I think there was going to be some real legitimate conversations about a lineman. Now, part of me was like, was it Spencer Fano and they bump him in potentially at that spot? But that's out of the picture now, and so I don't know how they'll prioritize it after second, third round. Spytek has said he wants to move around and get more picks, and so this to me screams a 4th, 5th round guard potentially. But I think they'll bring another guy into the mix, and that's all. They signed a few more guys to futures. Right now, I think they have 14 linemen in the building. And so you go into camp with like 15. I mean, you're 3 deep. And so that doesn't leave room for a lot of guys to get drafted. But I think there will be 1, maybe 2 guys drafted, or 1 drafted and a free agent, undrafted free agent signing, something like that. Because, listen, they definitely, they've mentioned how much they see in the room currently. But I think there's going to be a level of, hey, what can we do from a ground up, developmental guy, potentially to kind of add depth and see someone who's only indoctrinated to our system. And so most regimes, they want their guys, and then they want their guys learning what they do. And so that's my guess. To me, it's easier to draft and develop a highly touted tackle than it is to sign him in free agency. But guard, I think you could find more value later in the draft. A guy who can contribute and be there again, as I said, that 7, 8, 9 guy that you dress up eventually on game day. And so I think they'll be looking to that. They've got so many other holes, as you've probably talked about and I talked about on my podcast.
Yeah.
It's and so I don't know where the priority will be there, but I think they'll take a couple flyers on some guys to see just how we can add to the depth of that room, because outside of 3 players, Linderbaum, Miller, and JPJ, it's up for grabs, in my opinion.
I agree 100%. And so, let's do this as we start to tackle and really talk tackle here, because a lot of the way that I've approached the second round is that I look at a bunch of the guys there. It seems like some of the tackles are kind of falling, at least a lot of the mocks that I've done, whether it's Max Ionacre, the kid from Arizona State. I mean, gosh, former basketball player. He's got the athleticism, the frame, all of it that you could possibly want.
He's making push into the first round, which is, I see it because, it's harder to, that's a trait thing. It's harder to find those long arms, that athleticism, that tall frame. And that's, why the Spencer Fano, who was earlier, maybe tackle 1, 2, 3, is falling because of his arms. He's a plenty good athlete. So is Caleb Lomu from Utah. They had a really good tandem this year. But those guys are falling because there's not the traditional, I could plug and play this guy at left tackle, which is what everyone might. When you're thinking high first round, that's what you're thinking. And so there's less of those guys, but I think there will be value as, I think pass rusher will get overdrafted. There's going to be a lot of guys who are going to be a run on pass rushers, defensive backs. I think it's a pretty deep draft for that. As we know, there's not a lot of quarterbacks. There's a lot of wide receivers. And so you start to jockey the depth of each position with the needs of the teams that are drafting high. And I think there will be some chances to take if they're in that mode in the second round, or if, say they trade back and trade back up if they see a guy, there will be opportunities for guys to get some value for someone who can contribute to your offensive line.
Yeah, and like you said with Max, maybe he'll get past the Pats, but it's unlikely he's there. Mike Vrabel was real active with him at his pro day. Caleb Lomu is another dude. Like you said, Utah had two really good tackles. He seems to bring some great athleticism to the table as well. So basically what we're getting at is if the staff feels like they have enough between DJ Glaze and Charles Grant to be able to pass on those guys at the top of the second, or if they're really going to go for it or not.
Well, until Klint Kubiak said what he said, I thought it was for sure they were going to be taking a tackle in first, second, third round. I still think they might, but I think he believes that DJ Glaze was a little undervalued, a little set up to fail. Now we have to take, as a player, I make sure that players still have agency. He has to take, responsibility for his play. That's all we can do on game day. And so he didn't play well through times in the season. But as we saw when the season ended, Chip Kelly's offense was it felt just so uninspired and, not conducive to putting players in the best position to succeed. And so I think Klint Kubiak came in and saw DJ Glaze and said, this is a guy, coming off a year before who I think had promise. You said that he was ascending and then just had a really weird fart of a year. He was in a lot of really weird, obvious passing downs, was put in bad positions where they're just dropping back to pass. There was no, cohesive run game to speak of. And so they think that there's something more there. And I think they're right about that. Just how much, we're not sure. And so they're going to evaluate him in offseason, see his play strength, see how his body is changing. He's still a young player, and see how his athleticism fits in this scheme. The Seahawks had Abraham Lucas, who I think was a very undervalued tackle that they took and developed. And so I think that they don't view tackles as like, we have to have Trent Williams everywhere. We want good athletes, but these guys, if they're in our scheme, again, the floor of everyone is raised. And if we get the floor to raise, Ashton Jeanty's better. The run game is better. We've got two great tight ends, and then everything works off of that. And so I think they view things as in a real team-oriented mindset, which is, duh. But a lot of coaches, they lose sight of they're picking individual players and their traits and not seeing how they contextually fit into an offense when it's working like it should. And so say a DJ Glaze takes a step up, he gains more confidence from this scheme and getting coached under Rick Dennison for an offseason, he absolutely could be a starting caliber tackle for you in this scheme. There's going to be a lot of play action, zone boots. They're not really dropping back to pass 7-step drops. There's a couple, but there's not going to be Geno Smith taking a shotgun snap and sticking his foot at 11 yards and not moving. And so they're thinking, hey, this might be a guy that we can win with more so than it looks, on first glance.
Yeah, no, definitely. Look, that's the thing. If they feel good about their tackle situation, it kind of opens like a whole new world for them at the top of the second on how they can approach it. They probably go, D-line there? They feel good about DJ and Charles and essentially, I guess, just play the board there.
That's where my money is a defensive lineman. But listen, this is to me because there's been so much talk about the depth and a lot of the fits of a lot of players all over the board. After pick 7 or 8, this feels really, really wide open. And so they're going to really see how this plays out and see what kind of value they can get with that second round pick.
Yeah, no, I really think they're positioned to be able to play the best player available strategy, which could be huge for this team that has a lot of holes, admittedly. But now, as we really dive back into that tackle conversation with what they've got now, a bunch of fans seem to be ready to say, hey, just throw Charles out there and forget about DJ Glaze. What's your take, first of all, on that? And look, let's be honest, too, Charles is more of a traits guy. So what does he have, actually, in terms of potential?
Yes, and the few snaps he got, I liked what I saw. And, he's still very, very raw. But between both him and Caleb Rogers, what I noted during the season was the thing when you're a rookie, you get thrown in. Yes, things are moving fast, but you're now thrust in there against grown men. And to me, the thing that I'm looking for is play strength. And both of these guys had plenty of play strength. Really strong hands, a way to anchor in pass pro, whether they're getting bull rushed, and enough athleticism to get to their aiming point and move guys off the mark. Now, there's a level of practice and repetition that comes with making that a consistent thing that you can do against better players. But I definitely saw in Charles Grant really good anchor. His pass set was very fluid for such a young guy. There's a lot of technical stuff that I imagine they'll work on, but in the limited snaps I saw, there's a lot to work with there. There's just not enough to go on to say that you can plug him in and play. But that's the travesty with not getting him repetitions last year was like
Yeah.
that was a prime opportunity to kind of get his body just adjusted to this game because he's on such a snap deficit. And so these guys are gonna get a lot of play in the offseason training and the competition. Again, there's gonna be. I hope that they don't rotate guys too much because I've seen teams try to see, oh, is he a left tackle, right tackle, left guard, right guard, and they don't get set in a position for long enough to really get comfortable. But when you're not a starter, that's part of the gig. I understand that, and so that'll happen. But I do want to see these guys get comfortable in one spot and just really see what they can do with athleticism and one more year of strength, one more year of maturity. But I really like Charles Grant and Caleb Rogers. It's amazing how just kind of like nonchalant of picks they were. And the Raiders, listen, Klint Kubiak, you can believe, you cannot believe me. You cannot believe you or Ted Wynn or all the Raiders people, but this new staff sees something. And I don't think they're here to just like make things up. And so we'll see what that ends up being. But they're going to get their hands and mold these guys and really get them, bought into the scheme. And not to say the scheme covers bad players, but it does, again, raise the floor and make guys a little bit more competent when they're playing together. This team just won a Super Bowl. Their offense didn't blow anyone away in that game, but they ran the ball consistently, and they were absolutely a threat later down the season with Sam Darnold. And this is, I think, a scheme that really sets your team up to win significant games later in the season.
Yeah, coaching, scheme, those things matter in a big way, obviously. Contrary to what some may think, there is some talent in that offensive line room. And now, from the outside looking in, it finally feels like they have the staff that can come in and really elevate those guys. Because let's be real, this staff has the decades plus worth of experience in this scheme. Essentially, they've all got master's degrees in the Kubiak/Shanahan scheme. So who better really to teach it to them? But as we start to kind of wrap it up, we got to talk about Jeanty real quick because obviously we can't move on without talking about him because if this O-line does get rolling, he'll be a big beneficiary of it. So I want to know what you think about him fit-wise in this scheme and what he can do in it.
I mean, I think it's an incredible fit. I think he's got just incredible vision and then, contact balance. He's going to make the first defender really work to tackle him, bring him down, and make him miss. He had a top 5 missed tackle rate most of the season. And again, that was with, getting hit behind the line of scrimmage just so often. And so Klint Kubiak, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, wants to stay balanced. And so they're going to still run the ball. And even if the run looks like a 2-3 yard run, he's not discouraged because he sees it as part of the grander plan. And I think Ashton Jeanty is going to make that even better because of the way that if you can get offensive line, when we were approaching runs, we said if we can get the running back one-on-one with a corner or a safety or someone outside of our box, then he's got to make a guy miss. Well, I'd love that almost no one else in the league than to have Ashton Jeanty being the guy trying to make guys miss in the box. And then you start hitting chunks and chunks and chunks, and then Fernando Mendoza or if Kirk Cousins is the quarterback at the time, and you're talking about really deep crossing play action passes and in a really elite scheme with I think Charbonnet, excuse me, and the Seattle running back room were really good. Had a really good duo, had a really good tandem. Well, speaking of, we'll see if they sign a Najee Harris or a veteran guy because I think it'll be like a 3-1. I don't think they want Ashton Jeanty to take every snap, but he is an every down back. But they're definitely going to put him on some kind of a smaller pitch count than he had last year. But again, he is such a good scheme fit. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. I think they're going to spend a lot of time this offseason on pass protection. He had really good, reps in pass pro, but that is something that is just a non-negotiable for if you want to be an elite running back. But you get him in an outside zone scheme where defenders are being displaced, having to fill gaps on the fly with big bodies flying around. And I think he's just going to thrive. I can't wait to see how this kind of thing comes together. I think he's really well built for it.
Yeah, look, it's going to be real exciting to watch, but man, I got to say, Marshall, like I have taken up way too much of your time, so thank you so much for being so gracious. Before we do get out of here, I want to make sure we shout out all the great work that you and Ted are doing with the Just Win podcast. You guys also have a new teammate as well, and Sam Warren joining the Athletic. Maybe we see him get to the mix on the show as well.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get him involved, and we have some fun episodes coming up here in start of off season with Ted and I on the Just Win podcast. I'm going to be calling college football games in the fall, but still involved with the Raiders, and hopefully show up to camp and meet everybody and kind of see what this new regime is cooking. But I'm really excited to be a part of this. We're kind of growing the thing and bringing more, to me, deserving coverage as you're contributing to that as well of the Raiders in this organization. It's been interesting talking after I came in at the beginning of this past season and then into this transition. I'm trying to remind Raiders fans, because they're so shell-shocked of the last 20, 30 years of just like disjointed chaos. Yeah. I'm trying to get people to understand, I think that they may have hit a home run with the GM and the head coach. So much football to be played. So many things have to happen. But I don't know if they could have found a better coach. And we saw with John Spytek, the way he carries himself, the business mind, how he's playing this NFL game. They're going to have to get used to things being positive for a while. And that doesn't mean they're going to make a bunch of Super Bowl runs. That's the goal. But just like, being competent with the front office, the coaching staff, and having a chance to win on Sundays consistently is going to be a welcome change for Raiders fans. So I'm excited for them.
Yeah, look, all the folks outside of our Raiders media bubble have been saying that the Raiders are making real football moves. And I think that's huge. And I'm just honestly fired up for Raider Nation as well, that it all seems to be moving in the right direction for them. Again, though, Marshall, thank you so much for being so gracious with your time. I took up so much of it. I cannot wait to chop it up at training camp and get you back out on the show again as well sometime in the future. So again, thank you.
My pleasure, Jesse, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, look, guys, each and every week, I constantly thank the guests for joining us and coming on the show, because at the end of the day, like, they're giving us our time. That's invaluable. You can't replace that. But specifically with Marshall, we had all kinds of technical issues before we got this thing rolling, and he stuck with it through everything. That's a former NFL player that was willing to kind of jump through hoops to make this thing happen. And so I just respect the hell out of him. And again, all the guests that have come on, because look, this is technology. Sometimes it fails, and these shows are hard to put together sometimes. And this was definitely one of the cases that when it did work out that way. But I'm so glad that we made it work. We got it rolling, and Marshall was willing to do it because he provided such great info. I hope you guys learned a lot. I did as well. We talked so much offensive line with this Raiders team, which is funny because normally that's like the unsexy position. Obviously, a lot of that conversation has been for all the wrong reasons. We'll see now next year if the conversation is hopefully for good reasons about this offensive line, because if they turn it around, it's going to be a game changer for kind of kickstarting this rebuild for this team. But anyway, guys, with that is all we got for you in the show. Thank you guys for watching, listening, subscribing. If you haven't already, make sure you smash those like and subscribe buttons. And again, check us out online at silverandblacksportsnetwork.com and subscribe to that free Raiders newsletter that we drop every Friday morning. It's always chock full of the latest Raiders news, insights, and analysis. And it's completely free and a great way to support our channel. Again, thank you guys so much for your time, for listening, watching, subscribing, commenting. You guys make this thing go, and it's been so much fun to do it. The draft is coming up soon. That's going to be a blast. But in the meantime, we got another week to kill, I guess, quote unquote, before we get there. So I will see you guys next, again, on the podcast on Tuesday. So make sure you guys enjoy your weekend, and we'll catch you next week.